it's amazing to think about the Lord getting into position and doing all this and saying these things to foretell what was going to happen.
In that end of this story, there is the prediction of the entire rise and fall of the Christian church. Okay, in the Gospel of John, which we haven't touched on yet, the two last things that Jesus says on the cross contain within them incredible secrets.
Okay.
We're going to unpack those secrets.
All right.
The first thing, the two things are, I'm thirsty and it is finished.
Such simple little three-word statements.
That's
right?
it. And you'd think, I'm thirsty. Okay, he just said that because he was thirsty. I mean, that's just like, that was it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything, does it? Or does it? So the context, this is from John 19. After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, I am thirsty. A jar full of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. Could have left that whole thing out.
The whole thing, yep.
Of the story. If you were just trying to write a story for political or even spiritual impact. But it didn't get left out because the providence of God kept it in there because it actually has an incredible spiritual meaning to it. This is from Apocalypse Explained 83. He then said, I thirst, because he longed for a new church that would acknowledge him. To thirst in the spiritual sense signifies to long for truths of the church.
Wow.
That's what Jesus is talking about. He does not. I'm thirsty right now. He's saying, people on earth do not understand who I am, and I want them to, because that's the only way.
I'm thirsty for a better world.
Yeah.
That is so powerful, and of course that would be what because he always talked that way. He always talked in a multi-layered way, and I'm sure he was physically thirsty as well. But when they brought him that, he refused it. He wouldn't drink it.
Yeah.
Because part of the correspondence of that vinegar or sour wine that they brought to him was a falsified truth, and he was always about, no, I'm going to drink the real thing, the actual truth, not falsified truth.
Continuing later in Apocalypse Explained, we read in the word that the Lord hungered and thirsted, which means that from his divine love he willed and desired the salvation of the human race. Those who think of these things only naturally and not spiritually may believe that they involve nothing more than that the Lord thirsted and that vinegar was then given him. But it was because all things that the Scripture said of him were then finished, and because he came into the world to save mankind, that he said, I thirst, which means that from divine love he willed and desired the salvation of the human race. And that vinegar was given to him signifies that in the coming church there would be no genuine truth, but truth mixed with falsities, such as there is with those who separate faith from charity or truth from good. This is what vinegar signifies. They placed it upon hyssop signifies some kind of purification by it, for hyssop signifies an external means of purification. So in that in that small little bitty bit of this end of this story, there is the prediction of the entire rise and fall of the Christian church.
Amazing.
So Jesus
in 3 words.
Jesus is saying, I thirst. What that means is I want to save the human race. That's who Jesus is I want people who are miserable. I want them to be freed from their misery. And he knows that you do that through the truth. The truth is what sets you free. And he's thirsty for not that he needs the truth, but that the human race needs it. He wants a mechanism by which to deliver the truth to the human race, which is what the church is supposed to be. But then they give him this sour wine, and that's symbolizing that what was to come after him and based on him didn't do it. There was
still something else mixed in with it.
Well, just look at the history of the Christian church in the world, and that there's been some goodness in it, but there was so much that was not good and that was not even true in it that it didn't do it. It didn't quench the thirst of God. And that's, according to Swedenborg, that's why there was always this prophecy in the book of Revelation, everything of the end of that church and the new church, which will actually quench the thirst of God.
Another one that will remedy that and be what he's thirsty. So he's waited a long time to get what he wants in terms of that, a really good, to satisfy that thirst for the salvation, the human race. That's just awesome.
Further in Apocalypse explained, each and everything that is related in the Gospels respecting the Lord's passion signifies in the spiritual sense the state of the church at that time in relation to the Lord and the Word. They're giving the Lord vinegar mingled with gall, which was also called wine mingled with myrrh, signified the quality of the divine truth from the Word at that time, namely that it was mingled with the falsity of evil, and thus altogether falsified and adulterated. Therefore he would not drink it. But that afterwards they gave the Lord vinegar in a sponge and placed it upon hyssop, signified the kind of falsity there was among the upright Gentiles, which was falsity from ignorance of the truth, in which there was something good and useful. Because this falsity is accepted by the Lord, he drank this vinegar. The hyssop upon which they placed it signifies the purification of the falsity. That the Lord said, I thirst, signifies divine spiritual thirst, which is for divine truth and good in the church, by which the human race is saved. So what you have here is like the story of the wine and Jesus drinking it or not drinking it. It's doing two things at once. As we just said, it's prophesying the rise and fall of the Christian church. It's also critiquing the current state of the Jewish church and the people around who are not in that church, and how God, like the destruction of truth or the falsities, it was what needed to be done now and what will be needed to be done later. It was all wrapped up in this one little interaction.
Amazing. And that thought that Swedenborg brings there, and late in that quote, that you also have an image there of how it's going to go reach people who haven't been part of the organized predominant religion so far, the so-called Gentiles, and that they have a kind of falsity, but it's connected with being a good person. The hyssop was used, I don't know anything about hyssop, but it had something, it says, purge me with hyssop and I shall be clean. There's some scripture about that it was something used in purification. And so the fact that it was put, so the person who just grabbed some hyssop, I picture it, I don't know anything about it, I picture it being a little bit like a cattail or something that could hold some liquid, and then they sort of reach it up because he's up there on the cross. I don't know. But the fact that that's what they happened to grab and use for this had a meaning that has to do with purification. And so people who were not part of that system of some pre-existing religion were still about changing their lives. And so that made the falsity more acceptable, and he was able to at least taste it or take it in. It's amazing.
Yes, it was all brought together so that it would be something that meant something in the moment, but also meant something going forward, and could mean something to all of us all the time when we read it now.
And these details that seem so tiny were about things that were going to stretch out over thousands of years of coming history represented in one act, and who there at that time would have any idea, this represents these millions of people and those thousands of years. So to think of him being thirsty for the well-being, the spiritual, true well-being of the entire human race, and that all this religion business, which can sometimes go kind of badly, is actually really important to the spiritual well-being. When it works well, it's important to the spiritual well-being of the human race.
That's the mechanism by which God can accomplish the goals that he has. So when that's not working well, when people corrupt the church, man, that really gums up the works.
And it's killing something important,
Yeah.
In one sense, it's doing harm to the Lord.
If you thought saying I'm thirsty was kind of trite and small thing to say. Think about that. And the other thing he said, it is finished. It's just like, well, you didn't even have to say that. Like we could have known it was finished. Again, there's incredible potency to everything that comes out of Jesus' mouth, especially here. So in John 19 is where this comes from. It says, when Jesus had received the wine, he said, it is finished. Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. And this is from Swedenborg's book, The Lord, which is a lot of the Lord is just pointing out how all of Scripture is about Jesus and the meaning of everything Jesus did. And so it says, to say that the Lord fulfilled all of the law is to say that he fulfilled all of the word. As we can see from passages where it says that the Scriptures were fulfilled by him and that everything was brought to completion. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, so that the Scriptures would be fulfilled, when Jesus had received the vinegar, he said, it is finished. That is, fulfilled.
Fulfilled. And so I'm suddenly thinking of that statement early in the Gospel of John where it says that he was the Word made flesh. And a lot of what we talked about in this episode is how he was instructed by Scripture, how Scripture told him what to do and how to be, how he fulfilled what it said, and even to the very end, when he says it's finished, it's like, the whole job was done. And I assume part of that it is finished is also that he came to, what did we say in a previous episode, that he had to tame the hells, gain control over the hells, restructure the heavens, launch a new church. The job done,
Nobody understood that's what he was doing. I think probably if you were his disciples at the time and he said, it is finished, they would say, what's finished? Like, you didn't do it. Everybody thought you were going to come and be the king of the Jews. You're at least going to get the Romans out of here. What did we do?
It's a terrible ending. Like,
we
it's
didn't
not the
do
ending
anything.
you wanted.
What
No.
do you mean it's finished? That nobody understood the projects Jesus was actually working on.
Yeah.
And that and because people thought the crucifixion is just like setback or major setback.
Oh, it's terrible.
Whereas to him, it's like, no, this is the main thing.
This is what
we're trying to do, because as we've said previously in the episode, what that was and what it meant and why he had to go through it. So we didn't even get it, that he's like, we didn't get why he's doing what he's doing, but he says,
and all the Romans are still there. The Pharisees are still there.
Yeah.
Like nothing changed even of what they thought he was here to fix.
Even the healings
didn't get fixed.
Like he cured some people of blindness and leprosy, but there's still like plenty of people who were dealing with it. It's like, not. What do you mean? You didn't change anything. Nothing changed.
Yeah.
So what do you mean? It's finished. But yet this incredibly important, rippling out through millennia, spiritual work that he did in the spiritual world, in the physical world, has to do with human consciousness, with the divine and the human coming together. The stuff he was doing is like, he was like building the pyramids. Like, this stuff is going to be here for thousands and thousands of years. And this is going to, everyone in the world, everything that's happened since then was completely altered by those events and will be for the foreseeable future. This was a huge deal that happened sort of under everybody's nose, and they didn't understand it.
In Isaiah, it says, of the increase of his government and peace, there'll be no end. So it's going to keep increasing. And in some ways, it's like a delayed effect. We've hardly cashed in on this yet. I think the human race hardly even knows what Christianity is yet. Like, we haven't even really tried it in a full way yet. The best is yet to come.
Yeah.
This is why I talk sometimes about a bright future, that this is going to be the fulfillment of this, is what that was all. We haven't even started to cash in what that whole thing was about. It's amazing to think about the Lord getting into position and doing all this and saying these things to foretell what was going to happen. And now it's up to the human race to figure out what's going on and to move toward that heaven on earth that he was doing all this for.
we generally don't know what Jesus was doing. Think about how Christians will say to non-Christians or people that are trying to make into Christians, Jesus died for you. You know, like I just saw some YouTube clip where like, God had a son and he died for you. What does that even mean? What do you mean he died for you? What is it? How does somebody, I get it, maybe he was very important. How does somebody dying on, like getting put to death by execution by the state thousands of years ago, what do you mean he died for me? And the only explanation that people have had is like, well, God was so angry that if he hadn't done that, he would have killed you instead, which is like a human reason balks at that. Like, it's just like so many holes in that. It's the best people can come up with, but I just like people hanging on to that so tenaciously. What do you mean died for you? But this explanation, which is to say that you think that's some weird isolated thing in history, whether you believe it's even happened or not. No. The consciousness that you walk around in every day, like that's got the fingerprints of Jesus all over it. If he hadn't gone and done this fulfilling at the end, there would be so much hell in everybody's you wouldn't even recognize yourself.
Yeah. You would not be able to think what you think. You wouldn't be able to feel what you feel.
You wouldn't. You would be a million miles away from who you are right now. You'd be depraved and there'd be no light in there. Not to mention the way in which the life force from God sustained you every second of your life. That's coming through the infrastructure that Jesus built in this moment. The way that the human spirituality is progressing, that was done by Jesus in this moment. Like he died for you, meaning like it would be like whoever invented, like, what was it, Benjamin Franklin, electricity? Who was electricity? Was that like Thomas Edison? Who cares? Nobody actually invented electricity. People who harnessed electricity, they did that for you in the sense of like, now you're all using this electricity that they figured out how to do it. That's like the level of the Jesus thing, but like crank it up to 1 billion.
Yeah.
Everything you've got, think of all the things that make your life possible and the way it is right now. That was from this. That's from Jesus doing this.